May I kindly ask the panelists for agriculture to take their seats before we invite the Deputy Minister of Agriculture, Food and Agriculture, to give his introductory keynote. This is just to save a little bit of time between the two sessions, the local session and the joint session. The joint session comes first. So as soon as Berlin is ready, I'll invite Honourable George Udru, who is the Deputy Minister of Food and Agriculture responsible for horticulture, to give a 5-minute keynote, introductory keynote, and will then allow 5 minutes for Q&A. This is going to be very tight. We don't have much time, but maybe we could take 2 or 3 questions on either side. So be prepared for that. Before we move into the panel discussion, which is a local discussion, and we'll have more time for Q&A then too. But it is going to be quite tight.
So if you're waiting for Berlin, Berlin is ready.
Berlin is ready? Wonderful.
Yes.
So may I now invite Honourable George Udru, Deputy Minister of Food and Agriculture, responsible for horticulture, to give us the introductory keynote.
Thank you. Distinguished participants of this forum, the media, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and pleasure to be invited to this special investors forum, which provides the opportunity for Ghana to share with participants of this forum investment opportunities in the agricultural space. I commend the organizers for organizing this event, which offers a platform for mutual dialogue on investment opportunities for our two countries. It is also worth noting that this is organized under the aegis of the G20 Compact with Africa, which seeks to promote private sector-led development. The government of Ghana since 2017, under the Coordinated Program for Social and Economic Development, Policies 2017 to 2024, embarked on an agenda to create sustainable jobs. It goes without saying that this agenda has to be driven by the private sector with support from the public sector through the enabling environment. It is in this light that the government designed several interrelated programs in various sectors of the economy, including reformation of the public sector. The agricultural sector is still a key vehicle in the development of the Ghanaian economy. It employs 45% of the workforce and contributes about 18.3% to the gross domestic product. We are happy to report that the sector, which has been growing at an average rate of 3.5% for the past 5 years, has seen a jump to 8.4% of the year 2017. The priorities in the agricultural sector have focused on creating efficient production systems that would open opportunities for increased investment in all aspects of the agricultural value chain. We are doing this through a number of flagship programs. This includes the Planting for Food and Jobs campaign, which focuses on provision of critical inputs, marketing and extension services for selected food commodities. One District, One Factory, which has strong focus on the value addition of agricultural commodities and our joint effort to increase value added for many commodities. One District, One Warehouse, with the aim of increasing storage space for increased production. One Village, One Dam, for increased access to irrigation. Planting for export and rural development. for production and processing of selected tree crops for export and income diversification. Green Village production system for horticulture promotion under greenhouses. Railing for food and jobs, yet to be launched next year to promote livestock and poultry. There are other initiatives being pursued to create an enabling environment, such as the Ghana Incentive-Based Risk Sharing Agricultural Lending Scheme for enhancing access to finance by private sector operators in agriculture through loan guarantees and insurance facilities. Improved coordination among various government agencies to provide necessary information and support to potential agribusiness investors. Investment under development cooperation arrangement with development partners to provide infrastructure and other agricultural services. The establishment of a regulatory authority to tree crops such as rubber, oil palm, and cashew. Arrangements to strengthen agribusiness investment promotion and public-private partnership. Promotion of mechanization to reduce drudging in agriculture. Under all these initiatives, the private sector is a fulcrum. For example, under the planting for food and jobs activities such as supply and inputs, production, transport logistics, purchasing and marketing, warehousing and processing are all being done by private sector with government facilitating. In pursuant of private sector investment, we have recorded interest by some private sector operators to invest in the production and processing of sugarcane and rice, fertilizer and manufacturing and assembling of agricultural machinery. Existing agribusinesses are taking advantage of the current climate to scale up their activities. In conclusion, the time is ripe to invest in Ghana's agricultural sector, as expressed by previous speakers. The government's commitment to support growth of agribusinesses in particular is unquestionable. Our doors are open to potential investors, and we are ready to dialogue and offer assistance where needed. I would like the panelists to focus on how public sector can be more responsive to the needs of the private sector and how small and medium-scale agribusiness can be supported to grow on a sustainable basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The Honourable Minister has kindly agreed to take 5 minutes of questions. So should we take some on the Berlin side, 2 on the Berlin side, and 2 on this side?
Any
Berlin,
questions
can you hear me
from
okay?
Berlin? Yes, we're just seeing if we have any questions in the room. Yes, there is one. Please introduce yourself. Can somebody give the gentleman a microphone? Okay, the microphone is coming.
Charles Yanka from Berlin, German, African Cultural Institute. I would like to ask the Honorable Minister about the mechanization of agriculture. How is it going to be implemented, especially affordable for farmers to mechanize their agriculture programs? Do they have any sort of incentives which could improve their production?
Thank you. The government is supporting some agricultural machinery, including tractors from Brazil and the Czech Republic. We are going to establish agricultural mechanization centers across the country to be rendering services to the farmers at the rate which is going to be supervised by the government, the ministry. So the rate, you should make sure the rate is affordable for the farmers to access these facilities to enable them to increase their yield. Thank you.
There's one more question from Berlin. No, sorry, there were no more questions. Oh, there's one in the back, please. The gentleman in the back. Can somebody please give a microphone to the gentleman in the back?
This is Colin for HP Consult, Bad Berka, Germany. With regard to the facility that Professor Janker just asked, my additional question would be, is there any way that the government is going to give guarantee for the financiers who are coming from Czech Republic or from Brazilian?
Thank you. This facility I'm talking about has been there already. It's an existing facility which we inherited as a government. In fact, about 30% of the tractors from Brazil has already been supplied. It was a loan facility the government took between these two countries. So it's an ongoing facility which is going on, and the government issued a guarantee to back these facilities. So this process is an ongoing facility which we are trying to expand to enable the farmers to render this, for the farmers to access these facilities. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Michael. I would like to know what are the criteria for one to access this particular facility as a farmer? And secondly, what are the maintenance policies that you'll be bringing out for those going for this facility?
Thank you. These mechanization centers are going to be owned privately. It's going to be a private sector-driven facility because we've done this for the past, giving credit to farmers in this country. And there's an idea of anything coming from the government is free. That has been the system. That is why we've been always making a loss at this sector. So this time around, it is going to be a private sector driven. The maintenance and everything is going to be done by the owner who is owning the mechanization center and within that. So the fee they are going to charge is where the government is going to sit down with the operators and make sure the fees are accessible to the farmers, not to overcharge them for them not to access their services. So this time around, it's purely private sector operating. Thank you.
So my name is Emmanuel. Hello, my name is Emmanuel, and I have just two questions. My first question has to do with the value chain, along the value chain, when it comes to agro-processing. Are we considering mechanisms or structures for processing of the products we are going to produce? Or we are just going, as the minister said earlier, send back the raw materials, and then we expect finished products, or we are going to factor in the processing along the value chain? And my second question is, if we have a lot of this partnership ongoing, how are we sure that it's not going to cramp up the subsistence or the petty farmers that are trying to catch up with the market? Are we going to have ways that these micro farms can also compete evenly when these multinationals come in?
Thank you. Let me start with your first question. The agro-processing. Right now, we know you have the national buffer stock for food security, and they have been charged or tasked to mop up all the food from the farm gate. They buy them and put them under warehouses for storage. And I'll speak to you now. There are about 4 processing factories in the north processing maize into corn, flour, and others to be used for bread and other things. Now, the national buffer stock is there to buy every produce. And I can confirm to you last year, no farmer in this country, especially those who produce cereals, all of them were bought by the national buffer stock. And then onward distribution to the schools and the police and the hospitals, as we witnessed last year. And this time around, we are going to send them to the one for the areas which factories are ready. We are supposed to provide the raw materials. So sending the raw materials away and then bringing the finished products into the country is where we are working towards now. In fact, let me inform you that last year we used to import a crop like maize, but last year is the only year since 2006 we never ever imported 1 grain of maize into this country because of the planting for food and job. So right now we are trying to focus on the processing, like you just mentioned, and we are engaging with certain people who are setting up these industries, as said by the one they said, one factory. And the farmers, the smallholder farmers are the key. Don't forget that Ghana, we produce a lot of cocoa, and we don't have commercial farmers who are doing cocoa. It's these smallholder farmers who have 5 acres, 10 acres. When you combine, then you get a total volume of cocoa we export. Same thing is happening to those who are doing the cereals as well. So these mechanization centers are going to be assessed by these smallholder farmers who are owning 4 acres, 5 acres, 10 acres in total. So every farmer, no matter your size, you will have access to these mechanization centers so that you assess, that will enable you to increase your yield. That's the main focus on the smallholder farmers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day. We now move into the local session on agriculture, and I would like to invite Dr. Yao Ansu, who is the Senior Advisor to the Minister of Finance here in Ghana, to introduce your panel. Dr. Ansu, we now have 20. It would be good if you could leave about 5 minutes at the end for Q&A. So I'll prompt you when we're 10 minutes from the end. This session will end at 12:30, so you have 25 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Dede. As you all heard, agriculture is a very important sector to Ghana's economy. Over 50% of the people are employed. Around 50% of people are employed in it. And we also heard this morning about industry, importing about 1.6 billion worth of cars. We import close to $2 billion worth of food, which we could be growing here. So there's a lot of opportunity, both for other farms and in processing. And also, if we really industrialization is really going to go forward, having enough food to bring the cost of living down is the one that's going to help us basically leverage on our labor abundance to really have labor intensive manufacturing here. So agriculture is very key, not only in producing food, but also for our industrialization strategy. But there are a number of opportunities and challenges. And to help us discuss them, we have an excellent panel comprising, on my left here, Catherine Kroboduse, founder and managing director of Eden Thrift Limited in Accra. We have also Kenneth Kwate, a very enterprising farmer, managing director of Sidals Limited in Accra. We have on my right Hodia, who is head of Africa Regional Office of MIGA, World Bank of the World Bank Group. And then lastly, we have Nana Winful Finn, who is the head of the regional office of the North Fund, based in Accra. So, a number of issues. There are a number of opportunities and issues in the agricultural sector. Why don't we start with you, Ken? Maybe get with your take, particularly on the land tenure situation, which is really important if we're going to go modern commercial agricultural sector, and also your views on the agribusiness scene in Ghana.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Ansu. As you know, I'm actually a livestock and poultry farmer, and I ventured into crops also. My experience in the land tenure system, although I know it's quite challenging, has not been as challenging as most. So I'm not too sure I'm the best person to speak to that. But I do believe that once the land tenure issues that we experience, which are more intense in the urban areas than actually in the rural areas, the biggest problem we would have in our sector in agriculture is the markets. The markets are extremely large. To give you an idea, in 1996, I believe it is, when I chaired the National Poultry Farmers Association, the figures we were looking at were, the figures we were looking at for the market through imports was about the equivalent of $30 million. The latest figures I saw last year was $360 million. Which, just in poultry? Yes, just in poultry. So clearly the market is big, but unfortunately the local industry has been marginalized out of it. I believe the local industry is probably producing less than 5% of the market at the moment. Nevertheless, it's still an opportunity. It gives an indication of what the potential for the Ghanaian market is. And the question is, how do we take back the market, so to speak? Because up until 1996, we essentially were growing at a rate that was enough to provide the demands for the market. And then unfortunately for us, we liberalized our markets, and the markets exploded, and we have just not been able to keep up. For me, the critical thing, once we handle the markets, is the huge investments needed in the market to actually engender production here. Most NGOs and people who come and look at our situation focus mainly on how can we get the farmers to produce more efficiently. But that is it's a continuous thing, regardless of whether you have a large market. You are constantly focusing on being efficient. It is how do we get to the large market? And here we need a government policy that would allow for the holding of large stocks. By that I mean large inventories that would allow us to manage our markets better. It's not good enough, in my view, to just say we're going to ban or tariff or quota the numbers. If you're going to do any such thing, it has to be accompanied by you having the inventories, the stocks, to manage the markets. And that is where I see the investment opportunities, actually, in the processing and holding facilities. When you look at it, even to take 30% of the market back, you need, I believe, inventories in the range of about $80 to $90 million. And therefore, for me, that is where I see investment opportunities once we can get government policies to back up this kind of investment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Catherine, how do you see it? How can we really catalyze and really actualize the tremendous opportunities in agriculture in Ghana?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ansu. I would like to take this opportunity to use myself as an example so that one can understand the investment opportunity, or one of them, that is in agric. If one looks at the sector brief on agriculture and the agriculture-friendly land policy, it seems that policies are being done on land banks for release of large commercial farming. And I think we need commercial farms in agriculture in Ghana. My company is Eden Tree Limited, and we are a small company, and small SMEs in Ghana, we need investment, we need the push, we need partners to be able to grow. an article on Graphic Online said that we import $2.4 billion of food into Ghana, which runs across rice, sugar, sorghum, frozen chicken, fresh fruits, and vegetables. What I'd like to do is focus on one vegetable, just one, because this is my area. We import a lot of carrots into Ghana. When we started Eden Tree about 21 years ago, we were importing from Togo. Now the demand has gone beyond Togo, and we're importing carrots from Holland. If we can get investment from Germany to come and partner and just go do a commercial scale carrot production, I think it will benefit the local demand, and also we will then tend to export carrot into Europe and the sub-region. And we also want to focus on value added. We don't want to just export raw carrots. So there's the opportunity of, if Germany comes in to partner us, we need the machinery, we need advanced technology, we need carrot experts, we need the processing facilities, and all this makes the idea extremely attractive. We currently provide processed carrots, salads, and vegetables, but it's only for Accra, and it's on a small scale. However, if we have a partner Blue Skies, they have been successful in exporting cut fruits into Europe. So that opportunity is there for us to be able to export cut up carrots, cut in all shapes, combine it with other vegetables, add nitrogen gas to it to extend the shelf life. And there is a product that has a market that can actually help us both export and the domestic market, so that we stop, we are not importing everything into Ghana. So that's one opportunity that I have. The other opportunity that I see is that machinery, we really don't have tools and implements for smallholder farmers. There's nothing in between the hoe, the cutlass, and the tractor. So therefore, there's actually an opportunity for a training center to be set up for the engineers to be trained to be able to manufacture these small tools and implements locally. We cannot forever be importing machinery and tools, indefinitely. We need to start producing them here. So again, this is an opportunity for an investor to invest in a center that will train our engineers on producing small tools.
Thank you. That's fascinating. And in fact, I do see a synergy between what you're saying here in terms of tools and what our colleague from Swami Magazine was talking about the fabrication shop that they've set up. So maybe there's a win-win situation where we can look at it both in agriculture and industrial side. Now, Hoda, I know you guys are from the World Bank. You hover around the world and you look at all kinds of interesting opportunities and best practices going around. So what do you have to say for us? What are the opportunities in Ghana, and how should we grab them, and how should German investors get a piece of the action?
Sure. So Catherine's remarks reminded me of this model of trying to bring in a partner, whether it's a technical partner or a financial partner, typically from overseas, to come in and match with a local partner and build up a business. And I have a couple of examples where MIGA, so MIGA is the arm of the World Bank Group that actually our goal is to attract foreign direct investment into our member countries. So that is our pure reason for being. And the way that we do it is essentially to provide guarantees to those foreign investors for political risks. So basically, we create a scenario whereby you have a local partner, you have a foreign partner, the foreign partner comes in to bring in investment, and they're able to look at the investment on purely commercial terms because we essentially strip out the political risk element. So the risk that they're not going to be able to take out foreign currency, the risk that there's going to be political violence that's going to interrupt the project, the risk that the government will interfere and impose regulations. We strip all of that out by providing insurance against those risks and enable it to be a purely commercial transaction. So just to give a couple of examples where we've done this throughout Africa, in Sierra Leone, we are supporting a venture with Dole Asia, which is owned by Itochu of Japan, a $40 million investment into a pineapple or tropical fruit processing plant, whereby this plant will cultivate, harvest, and process pineapples, mango, and passion fruit. Okay, so we talk about value chain. The gentleman asked about it. This is not just cultivating the fruit, but also a cannery, which will create juice, which will process canned fruit, which will process frozen fruit, and be able to export it. The goal of this venture is to produce 120,000 tons by 2023, with an annual revenue of $35 million a year. So this is a very large venture, and it's in Sierra Leone, one of the riskiest places to do business on the continent. If it can be done in Sierra Leone, most certainly it can be done in Ghana, right? This venture will create 3,500 jobs. Most of them will be local, so local farmers and local workers, and it will contain a training center, as you mentioned, training, and a program to help farmers grow these fruits. That's the kind of thing that we're seeing, and we're really hoping to do more of throughout Africa, and I think there's definitely opportunities here in Ghana. To give another example, and this is not a project we're involved in, but I got very excited during the break when I met my friend Charles Atia, who produces Bee Diet, granola, and cereal. So Charles has one mill. He buys seeds from local farmers. He mills the seeds, and he produces various different types of organic breakfast cereals. This is millet, his best-selling product. And he also bakes and creates and packages granola, which is sold in organic markets here in Ghana. So Charles is he's one investor, he's one entrepreneur, right? But he needs investment. He asked me, can you help me? Can you help me raise money? Can you help me find a foreign investor? And I hope that we can, because Charles needs many more machines. He needs many more mills. He needs to invest in capital to increase his production and hopefully be able to export it someday. And that's the kind of thing that MEGA can help support. I'll stop.
Thank you so much for that. It's very exciting, and I hope Charles can be helped, and others like him too. Now, Nana, Northfund is the new kid on the block. There's a lot of excitement about your coming, and particularly given Norway's track of particularly green energy and engineering and stuff. So we are really excited. And what are you planning to help us do to move our agricultural sector upwards and link it to industry?
So first, thank you very much for having us, everyone. As Mr. Ansu alluded to, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. As Mr. Ansu alluded to, we opened up our office fairly recently at the end of last year. Let me say. We have spent a lot of time looking at agribusiness in particular here, because our focus is largely, it's all along the value chain, but based on our historical experiences. Hello? Yep. But based on our historical experiences, particularly in other regions of Africa, our focus has shifted to the middle of the chain. So we can look all along the value chain and invest in opportunities all through, but we can only do primary, meaning production, like farming, alongside upstream or downstream, and we can do anything else further down the value chain. By way of introduction, Norfund is Norway's development finance institution. We're 21 years old. We are quite specialized. We focus on food and agri primarily in sub-Saharan Africa. We also invest in renewable energy, financial institutions, and funds. Now, on the food and agri front, which is where we have spent most of our effort, We've looked at over 100 companies in the food and agri space here in Ghana in the time we've been here. So just a few general observations looking across that sample. And most of this will unfortunately not be news to many of the practitioners in the sector here. Few of our agro-processing companies are operating at capacity today for reasons that include inconsistent supply of inputs of the right quality and quantity. It touches on some of the points others have made on the panel. Many of the SMEs in agribusiness remain constrained by a lack of access to reasonably priced capital. Across the value chain, we see common trends that threaten the sustainability of the companies playing there. Few true institutions exist. Unfortunately, we have not done a good job of building those as Ghanaians. When I say an institution, I mean with appropriate governance, systems, processes, companies that can outlive their founders. In many instances, what we see is that there are very few companies that have survived more than one generation here. Most of the ones that were here when I was growing up in food and agribusiness don't exist or are shells of themselves now. Many companies are still barely operational as a result of reasons that include, in some cases, just poor capital structure, in addition to all of the systemic issues we've talked about. And I think at the heart of most of these issues is the fact that there really are not adequate linkages in the value chain. So every year, year in and year out, we have many crop subsectors where we end up for several months of the year with a glut of product because we're not processing enough. Conversely, we have all of these processing entities that don't have enough inputs to process and cannot source the inputs of a consistent quality locally, and so most of their inputs are actually imported. Sometimes these problems can feel overwhelming because it feels like there is a more holistic approach needed. I think many of the policies in place from the Ghanaian government itself, as well as from institutions such as Norfund and other European ones, are the right ones. But I think they lack coordination in some instances, and we're all not talking to each other, which is a part of the reason we continue to have these issues persist. Now, from Norfund's standpoint, the way we think about this is, at the heart of the issue is the fact that whether it's in agribusiness or other areas, by introducing our capital, we look to do a lot more than introduce capital. We look to build an institution that the founder can leave behind, that our children will come and meet, because I think that is really the crux of the issue, in addition to the systemic issues around the sector. So when we come in, if we invest equity, we look to play a role in governance in the company. We look to have a situation where the founder can take a vacation. I mean, is it a company if you can't go on vacation for a month and expect things to run, right? We look to bring in place proper systems, proper processes, in addition to helping from an operational standpoint. The truth is, we operate in a really volatile environment. So even for the best of entrepreneurs, you can go to work intending to do A to Z things on your list. There's a fire to put out. Your generator is not working. There's no diesel. The power's out. You have to produce, etc. And so it's very easy to get your eye taken off the ball because of all that's happening around you. When you have an institutional investor, one of the things we look to do is to help you focus on a game plan for a particular period of time, where we help you execute. You are driving, it's your company, you have operational expertise that we probably cannot match because our expertise is more financial. But the truth is, in partnership, we're able to keep you on track, whether it's through bringing other resources in to help. In many cases, we see management teams that need to be augmented. The founder might be a strong visionary, but perhaps not so great on the production floor, perhaps not so great at marketing and business development. So it's really taking a more holistic look at the company to see where it is that there are areas where we need to put in, in place measures that will move the growth plan forward and allow it to be attained in the time that we've all agreed. That's it. I apologize for not going through the slides. It didn't feel like the right forum for that.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you've given us enough to think through. Well, thank you for all the panels. In view of the fact that the floor hasn't had much time to interact, I would like us to take a couple of questions, and I'm told there would also be additional time in the next session. So if you have any burning questions or clarification or comment or for the panelists, please raise your hand and I'll call upon you. Please make your question pointed and short.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Emmanuel, Cocoa Project, Ghana. My question is that we all know that most farmers in Ghana are smallholder farmers, or in Africa. And then we have a lot of investment companies. I've been to a lot of conferences, I met a lot of companies, but they fund projects which are in the millions. To the Ghanaian farmer or the African farmer, it's just not realistic. So, as having an office in Ghana, how do you actually directly work with the smallholder farmers? Thank you.
Okay, we'll take another one, if there is any.
Hello, so this is for the second speaker, Catherine. For the production, do you foresee possibilities of the introduction of genetically modified foods to enhance production as means of investment?
GMO. Okay. Nana, could you?
I think it's a very fair question. In our history, we've done a lot of investing in production or in farming. What we have found is that, much like other investors have found, we have not been so good at managing the risk around farming only. So as investors who need to protect the capital in order to have capital to reinvest, we've made the strategic decision to focus not exclusively on enterprises that do farming, because we have had to admit perhaps we're not as good as at managing the risks around those as we would like. However, if we have a processing opportunity, a processing company looking to backward integrate into farming, we will happily invest. If we have a farming entity looking to forward integrate into processing, we will happily invest, of course, assuming everything else works with the investment opportunity. In addressing smallholders, for our sorts of institutions, it's difficult to invest in a single smallholder. So what we look to do is to look at communities or cooperatives of smallholders, in particular when they are providing inputs into a processing entity. So that's the approach that we come at it with. I appreciate your point. It is largely smallholder farming we're doing in Ghana, but from an investor hat standpoint, it's also difficult to operate at the individual micro level. So this is our approach.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
Yes. Okay, I think I have.
Okay. Okay, after Catherine, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I just want to add to Nana's point, because we have a similar approach at MEGA, and I think most DFIs do. So in order to support small farmers, there's a couple of different models. So one is through cooperatives and other means of aggregating. Another is through agricultural banks. So just to give an example, MEGA supported the Land Bank of South Africa to provide capital, which was then on lent to small farmers throughout South Africa. Another way is, so that's basically through a financial intermediary. Another way is through funds, through private equity funds that then on lend to smaller farms. So these are the ways. There has to be some way in which to aggregate it to make it make sense. That's
0 seconds. Go ahead.
Yes. The genetically modified foods, no. My answer would be no. Simply because I believe in the natural process. So I will be the wrong person to direct that question. My answer is no.
Well, that's very good and efficient. Thumbs up. Thank you so much. Join me in thanking the panelists. Thanks. And as I said, there will be opportunities in the other session to follow up with your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ansu, for such an excellent session. We have completed it on time, and we are now going to link up again with Berlin for joint discussion on agriculture, moderated by Tanya Lodansky, who is the Senior Manager responsible for agribusiness at IFC in Nairobi.
Yes, hello everybody. Can you hear us, Accra? Yes. Okay. Great. So welcome back to the joint discussion. With us on this continuation of the joint panel from the Accra side, we have Catherine Krobo Eduse, who is the founder and managing director of Eden Tree Limited. We also have Kenneth Corty, who is the managing director of Sidals Limited, a poultry company. And then here with me on stage, we have Hans Thomas Kessler, who's a partner in Herbert Smith and Freehills. We have Hans-Peter Landkees, who's the Vice President in IFC for Economics and Private Sector Development. And we also have Franziska Holman, who is the Director for Corporates in Africa in DEG. So I think maybe first what we can do is bring a little bit of the conversation from both sides of the world into the room. And I'm going to ask you, Catherine, to perhaps summarize your 2 or 3 takeaways from the discussion that you just had in Accra. And maybe recognizing that you are yourself already running a successful business in the horticulture sector in Ghana, if you wanted to add any additional perspectives of your wish list for what could Ghana do to really grow successfully into a regional agribusiness hub for Africa. Catherine.
My takeaway mainly is that it is important that we add value to agribusiness, which means that we need to increase processing and not export our raw produce indefinitely. So there are opportunities here in Ghana with small-scale industries that need investments. And if we can come together, we need partners who are in the same industry, who will bring their expertise to join force with us so that we can actually come together and then succeed. For example, earlier on, I used a company which is Blue Skies. They have been successful at exporting cut fruits. They've added value to the fruit, and they've been exporting to Europe for some time now. And I think we need more industries like that so that the agribusiness can move forward rather than just export our raw produce. Do you have anything
Thank
to
you
add?
very much, Catherine. Kenneth, would you like to add something? You're also running a successful business in Ghana, so would you like to add anything from your side?
Well, I think, I think it's quite obvious that in many of the industries in the agricultural sector, we're always looking at the challenge of small-scale operators. I am one who doesn't believe you need to turn them into, necessarily need to turn them all into large-scale producers to provide the raw materials that are needed. I think the problem is more to do with aggregation, which is that the farmers are small scale, but they're also so spread out, doing different. You go into, for example, you go into the north, and you have a farmer who's producing corn right next to a farmer who's producing groundnuts, and then the next farmer who's producing groundnuts, if that's what you want, is miles away. So when people go into aggregation, they have a massive transport problem getting the volumes you need for the scale to go into agro-processing. I think eventually they will become large-scale commercial farmers, but I don't think that it's necessary to turn them all into large-scale commercial farmers to get the volumes you need for the agro-processing industry immediately. We can grow the small-scale farmers into those large-scale farmers in an organic manner. And so I suppose the focus for me, I think the investment opportunities in Ghana are still in the agro-processing sector, because if we get the agro-processing sector going, they are the ones who are going to drive the scaling up of the production that we try to foster here in Ghana.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Kenneth, for summarizing some of the discussions you had in Accra. I think the discussion here was very similar. We also focused on processing. Everybody agrees that Ghana has a lot of potential to become the regional agribusiness hub, not just only for itself, but for West Africa, and to continue to grow its export business. But from the point of view of the German side, some of the things that were flagged here included improved access to energy, both for the smallholder farmers, many of whom are off-grid, but also to build the agri-processing sector, we need to bring prices of energy down in order for that sector to be competitive. We also focused on additional instruments for insurance and risk mitigation, whether it's political risk or business risk. And we also talked about how some of the German expertise, especially, the minister mentioned mechanization, could really fit quite well in terms of the development and improvement of productivity in Ghana's sector. So that's just to give you a flavor of the conversation that we had here. But I'd like to now turn to Hans-Peter. Hans-Peter, under your leadership, IFC recently completed a deep dive strategically into the agribusiness sector in Ghana. Maybe you can summarize a few takeaways from that exercise.
Thank you, Tanya, and really thanks for having me here. I'm going to do a little publicity for these country private sector diagnostics, which we have been producing, which is what Tanya is referring to. We're doing this now also under the umbrella of the Compact with Africa. It's an attempt to take a bottom-up perspective on different sectors in African countries in which we and investors that we work with perceive to be potential that is underexploited. And these are sectors where, by design, by our methodology, we try to find sectors in which we can get over the finish line within the medium term, where the problems are not very long-term and structural, but where there is investment potential, and through some action upstream in the policy area or in capacity building, we may be able to get over that finish line. In the agribusiness sector, which is one of the three that we identified and discussed in Ghana, in the agribusiness sector, we see very significant underexploited potential based on land, water availability conditions in Ghana, but also on Ghana's relative geographic proximity to European markets. For instance, when you compare with Kenya, high-value horticultural from Ghana can go to European markets by fast boat. From Kenya, they have to be flown in. That's a 25% cost advantage, which Ghana can exploit. And there are some companies that are beginning to do so. So Blue Sky, we just heard, is one of those companies. VegPro is another one, which is supported by IFC and USAID. I had the privilege of visiting VegPro's facilities 2 hours from Accra. What you find is that there is very fertile, well-irrigated land. You can bring your produce. In this case, it's baby corn. You can bring those produce fairly quickly to the relevant logistics facilities and ship it off to Europe. They're working with an outgrower model, and I think that's true for Blue Skies as well, where smallholders produce for the company. So that's a fairly flexible model. It's a bit like outsourcing in manufacturing. Now, a key constraint that we see and that this diagnostic identifies across Ghana is land. It's been referred to several times. Partly it's the overlapping formal and customary rights that create complications in the land area. So how can you address land? That is an issue where AgDevco, for instance, is a company that's an aggregator of land. We know that DFID has been supporting land, and we at World Bank IFC are trying to get into that kind of support as well. How can we create land banks that become available for investors without all the complications?
So overall, Hans-Peter, if I can summarize, the IFC and the World Bank Group are also quite optimistic on Ghana's potential. There are some barriers that are still holding back investment, but collectively, it's nothing that can't be addressed. The economic potential is there, and the competitiveness is quite clear. So, Francisca, maybe I can turn to you. I mean, in the last session, we heard that German food processing companies are maybe not very active overseas investors in general, but Germany has a lot of other potential that it could bring to Ghana, including in the area of skills, of agronomy and also especially in the area of machinery. So you've been looking at these investments for many years in Africa. Maybe you can share your perspective on what's holding back German investors and what can we do to actually scale up this type of investment in Ghana?
Thank you, Tanya. Well, it's difficult at this moment in time not to repeat what already has been said in this morning. So all aspects are really relevant. We heard about the large German companies, the DAX companies, which are active, and the financing instruments, risk-sharing instruments. Dr. Liebing said we need more of this. I think there's a lot available in MIGA, India, in long-term financing provided by KfW, by DEG, by IFC. So I think that is should not be a bottleneck. In terms of, with respect to the so-called German Mittelstand, represented today by Mr. Bude from Drechselmeier, I think there it's worth it to spend some words on, what is the philosophy and what is the culture of German Mittelstand, and why don't they invest so easily abroad? I mean, we have heard about why Germany's economy is running very well. But one aspect hasn't mentioned yet, and these are the cultural differences. I mean, we hear also from our African companies who are our clients, DEG's clients, that they complain about finding the right partners, that it's difficult to team up with German companies. They're so demanding. They have very high and strict requirements, and every decision takes a long time. But I would like to make a little bit of advertisement and try to improve the understanding, the mutual understanding for the different culture, because German companies. And maybe it's a bit German culture. We analyze thoroughly, we analyze the risks and the chances. And once we take a decision, it might take some time, but then we are looking for long-term partner, long-term view, long-term investment. And once we took a decision, or German companies took a decision, they don't change it so easily. So there is a chance to find a very good and long-term partnership between Ghana and between Ghana and Germany. And from the German side, the German companies should change their perspective from only analyzing the risks into also seeing the chances of dealing with a young population, with a very innovative country, with the chances of maybe being a little bit behind the technology. It's like moving from mobile phone to, or from no phone at all to mobile phone. And now what we see are really high-tech investments in modern mobile data systems, for example. So I think there are many chances in the technology sector for German Ghanaian cooperation. And of course, we need the support from the Ghanaian government in all these aspects which have been mentioned already, in land rights, in stability, in water rights, etc. So, change a little bit the perspective and try to understand each other better and start cooperating.
So a call for action also for the German companies.
For all.
They're great long-term partners to change a little bit their perspective on how they see opportunities in Ghana. So excellent. Thanks, Franziska. Hans Thomas, maybe I can turn to you. I mean, a lot has been said about legal stability, the rule of law. You're in this profession, so when you're looking at your firm's experience in Africa and in Ghana, what have been some of the major challenges, and would you also have suggestions for the regulatory agenda to help it easier for your clients to invest in Ghana?
I think what Franziska just mentioned is really important to understand restrictions, limitations imposed or characterizing the other side. If you look at European investors, whether that is Mittelstand and medium-sized companies or Institutional capital, Mittelstand is, of course, influenced by experience, by cultural background, by probably conservative, careful consideration of business opportunities, which is on the one hand sometimes burdensome, on the other hand probably an advantage and a quality of German investors. If you look at institutional investors, and one should not underestimate the strength of German institutional investors globally. We have insurance companies, pension funds, high net worth individuals who apply institutional criteria to investing in foreign countries. And if you want to attract and mobilize such capital, whether medium-sized company capital and investment or institutional investment, you need to understand what actually drives them, what limits them, what restricts them. And the rule of law is, of course, one important aspect. And if you look back into the 90s, for example, there were some big institutional investors from Europe who pursued a developing market strategy at the time. And many of them actually pulled back and pulled out of that strategy. And then over a long time, we haven't seen them really as very active, strong investors. That is currently changing. That is a big opportunity, I think, for Africa at the moment, because regulation is also driving institutional investors into what I would call impact financing and sustainable financing or investment. And regulation very clearly motivates institutional investors globally to look at opportunities in kind of developing countries, in Africa and other places, and they are going to do that. And with a few to attract them, I think there are a few points that an African country, an African regulator, legislator, but also an African businessman or woman should consider. They are European investors driven by regulation. There are certain points that they need to kind of comply with. Compliance is one point. Compliance is not only corruption and other points, but it's also, of course, land grabbing. You will not find an institutional investor taking a reputational risk investing into an agricultural scheme. You need to package an investment opportunity in such a way that investors and their capital providers feel good about it. And I think that is an important aspect. Structuring investments in a way that international institutional investors feels comfortable. And there you need, of course, professional advice, you need experience, you need to understand the other side. In that respect, I think it is not so difficult to actually do it because at the same time, still given the strict requirements they have to pursue, there is also a lack of such products and such projects. And of course, institutional investors will take a very positive view and try to be considerate when analyzing such a project, investment opportunity, and they will try their best. And therefore, what Franziska said, understanding each other is really important to analyze the limits, restrictions upon the other side, and then trying to structure a project in such a way that it works. I think that is what our firm has been trying to do now over many years, and that what we experience in many countries.
So maybe just one follow-up question to you, and then we will actually start taking questions from the audience. So please start thinking about your questions. But Hans Thomas, in the last session, very briefly, this whole question of regional trade came up, and the fact that if Ghana aspires to be not just a hub for itself, but also for regional trade, that there are some still regulatory and transactional bottlenecks to moving goods across borders and logistics. Do you have any specific views on this topic or recommendations that we could also put on the table?
I think agriculture globally is a highly regulated industry, given its social dimension and importance for nearly every country. If you look at the EU, I mean, we cannot blame Africa for having trade barriers, given our own history and what we apply in our free market, which is, of course, highly regulated and protective. I did my PhD on NAFTA, and in North America, for example, the North American Free Trade Agreement, agriculture was one of the hottest topics because it got such political and social dimension. So I think with regard to trade barriers, tariff and non-tariff, one should approach it, but one should also be realistic. It will take time. And usually those countries pushing it hard are those countries who can afford it best. And that is not different like in Europe, actually, than in Europe. I think it will take time, and one should not be kind of overly optimistic about kind of quick results there. It is an ongoing theme which will need constant attention by politicians and administrators, but that is not the quick solution. That's very clear, in my view.
Not a quick solution, but clearly one that needs to be put on the table.
Every day.
So why don't we open it up to questions, and perhaps we can go to Accra first. And if you could also introduce yourself, if you have a question to a specific speaker, please let us know. Otherwise, the best position will answer.
So I'm Emmanuel, and I want to ask a question. With regards to the understanding each other's needs and coming to a consensus, in your opinion, do you think that, which of the two do you think would have to make the first move? Is it the investor coming in or the Ghanaian moving out? Which of these two parties would have the first move? And the second question will have to do with the climate change issues in Africa in recent times. How would that be a standing block for an investor trying to invest in Ghana? Looking at how stringent the Germans are with analyzing risk.
Thanks for the question. So who would like to start? Franziska? All right, go ahead.
Okay. Well, who makes the first move? I mean, this pretty much depends on who has the strongest interest. Whether an investor goes to Ghana and seeks for partners, then he is taking the first step. And if a Ghanaian company entrepreneur is looking for a good partner in Germany, then of course, the initiative should come from this party. I think we shouldn't think about it whether it's the one or the other making the first movement into the other direction. It's just, we move together. We want to cooperate, and there are platforms, there are initiatives like this conference, like the Compact with Africa initiative. So let's take the opportunity and simply reach out and look for partners, whoever needs them.
Thanks, Franziska. Fully agree with you. Does anybody want to take the question of climate change? Actually, maybe we should hear from Catherine or Kenneth first. Do you already feel that climate change is affecting how you operate your business in Ghana?
Definitely. Climate change, it's making the sun hotter and hotter during the dry seasons. And when that happens, it actually lowers our yields, and it creates a problem for us. However, again, I think technology will be what can reduce that factor, and so therefore we need expertise in that field as to how to manage the climate change, if there is actually a way in which that can be managed, as it is global. When it comes to, I'd also like to add on, for the German investors to not be so comfortable regarding regulations and their risks. I think our government has recognized the fact that processing is the way to go. So maybe it is time that they take a second look at Ghana, because even our cocoa, it's like we are now realizing that we need to start producing the chocolates here rather than just be sending the cocoa beans out for their chocolates to be done. So the government, they're coming together, they're creating land banks, they are creating opportunities that will make it easier for investors to come in. So I think they should take a second look.
Thanks, Catherine. Kenneth, would you like to add?
Well, not really to the question you posed, but if I can, I would like to ask a question of the last speaker out there, which was, I got a sense that the gentleman was, I'm trying to remember the name, but he
Hans
spoke
Thomas.
about how, Hans Thomas. Yes, I got a sense that he spoke to an issue which we've been grappling with for several years about regulations in agriculture and free trade. We have been part of the stance against liberalizing the markets here to imports for several reasons, including that agriculture on the other side of the world was not subject to the principles of free trade. And I think we have suffered for it. I think it's not just that we have suffered, it's actually denied the opportunity for investors to actually come into Ghana and invest in the agricultural sector. And I believe he sort of gave me the sense that he was acknowledging that we really need to take a second look at that. I don't know if I read him right, because this is something that is very dear to my heart, and I think it needs to be resolved.
Would you like to come in? Or?
Yeah, trade liberalization, especially in agriculture, is of course something I'm supportive of. I simply believe that it will go step by step, given the kind of political and social dimension of it, and that is what I said. I think it's altogether very positive. What is currently being discussed, it's not only about tariffs; it's also about non-tariff restrictions that hinder trade to flourish. And of course, from an investment perspective, it would be extremely helpful to kind of grow the markets that a Ghanaian domestic producer can supply, and the other way around. But I believe that this is one important aspect, but one of many, and that this one aspect will take time to be resolved and to be put into something better. In Europe, it has taken 60 years or so, or longer. And in the Americas, it has taken 20 years, and it hasn't been resolved yet.
So let me turn to Hans-Peter. Perhaps you'd like to weigh in.
Yeah, actually, I'd like to go back to the question of who moves first. It's a very interesting question. And one thing to note there is that the question of investment in Africa, the question of investment in Ghana is full of misperceptions. The large companies, large German companies, large companies anywhere, they have knowledge on the ground. But the next tier, the Mittelstand in Germany and the equivalent elsewhere, they don't have the same kind of intelligence on the ground. They don't have the same transparency, the perceptions. And that is causing major obstacles. So one thing to note, is it risky to invest in Ghana? Is it risky to invest in Africa? If you look at IFC's portfolio, 60 years of investing across the region, it's a fairly healthy portfolio. We have a 4% NPL ratio, and it's not higher in Africa than it is in East Asia. Yeah? If we look at the database we have on infrastructure investment, just to take another example which is full of misperceptions, the credit quality of IFC's private infrastructure investments in Africa is higher than the average OECD private infrastructure credit quality. And in order to know that, you have to go there. You have to be interested. You have to invest in that knowledge. Now we have to help. We have to help with that step. And I think it's our institutions, Francisca, that really have a role in that. I think we also have to go and find the investors and tell them about it. We have to show them the instruments that are there. So we're all developing risk-sharing facilities, for instance. In agriculture in West Africa, we have, IFC has now set up a risk-sharing agreement, a risk pooling for banks that provide loans to smaller producers across the region. So there's a risk pool that makes it easier for them to lend into agriculture, for instance. That we hope to use these kinds of facilities to push out the boundaries. And the same is true for risk sharing in other areas. We heard that a little bit before.
Thanks, Hans-Peter. Why don't we open it up to questions now from Berlin? Are there any questions in the room?
Charles Janka. I think the German food industry should play a very important role so far as training of the farmers in Ghana is concerned. The infrastructure might be very, very low, and they have the senior expert service, the German industry, which is based in Bonn, which usually go to many developing countries to transfer their expertise and know-how. How does this play a role in this German Ghana Food Agricultural Cooperation?
Should I? Well, thank you very much for the question. And before I answer the question, just one comment on Hans-Peter. I couldn't agree more. It's same with DEG. Our African portfolio is performing better than other portfolios, other regions. And the agri portfolio in particular is performing really well. So our experience is good. So obviously the risks are manageable. They are there, but you can manage them. And what I meant in who's moving is I would like to see Ghana and German entrepreneurs and partners to talk at the same level, to be at equal footing. And that's what I mean with it doesn't matter whether we are moving or they are moving. So we have to move together. To your question, yes, the German plays an important role in training. We have several programs. You mentioned the SES. There are vocational training programs. There's a program which is called Private-Public Partnership.
And that is what we are going to see increasingly, also in conjunction with impact financing and impact investment, that we will try to empower the individual farmer, despite him harvesting a relatively small piece of land, and to provide thereby access to finance, to fertilizers, to technology. I think that is important, one important factor socially on the one hand, but also with a view to attract international conscious impact capital, because otherwise I think some of the large institutions, including German Mittelstand, rather shy away. So I think to strengthen the grassroots structure, to strengthen to overcome fragmentation, whether that is by improving feeder roads and other stuff, and thereby improving transport opportunities, possibilities in regions. That is really something important, and to rather look at this as a strength and something given, but trying to improve and help the current structure to actually live up to larger scale. I think that is an important factor, and that's something that we are going to see more strongly.
Thank you. So now I think we have like 30 seconds or less for each of the remaining.
So I'm going to be a little bit boring, but the number one issue is land. The number one issue is to have consolidated, sizable land that is well serviced by water, electricity, and roads. And for that, we need public-private partnerships. We have Henri Kerali here, the director for the World Bank. They're very active now. We've had others in Ghana working on this question. Let's make a push on the land question.
Yeah, very much agree. So, Franziska?
On my wish list, there is biology and agricultural practices as part of the normal primary school education, primary, secondary, and hopefully also vocational training. And on my a little bit more longer-term wish list for Ghana, or the vision is I want to see Ghanaian products in German supermarkets, ideally the best chocolate of the world.
Hey, here's to that. So let's go to Accra, Catherine and Kenneth for closing aspirations from your side.
I'd like to say my wish list is that small-scale companies in Ghana will scale up, will grow, so that we can also have partners with the companies in Germany, so that our machinery, because to be able to move forward, we need to fix all these issues where our technology, our machinery, is up to date, and then we have a healthy trade between us. My wish list also is that the governments on the sub-Saharan continent will be able to fix the trade barriers so that we can, because there's also a huge market in Africa, but because of the trade barriers, we're also not able to tap into those opportunities. But give and take, I think the future looks good. And as you said, your African portfolio is doing well. So I don't know about Ken, but my company is available for talking to a partner in the industry to be able to help us grow. That's my wish list.
Well, since this is an investment forum, if I should call it that, I suppose the real wish is how we can foster investment from Germany in this particular case. I've had experiences with foreign investment, and I've been in the discussions with several potential foreign investments. My experience has been that most of this is institutional foreign investment. And my greatest concern is that generally foreign investment is a little too impatient for agribusiness here. And I think if you even look at the great achievements in the agricultural sector achieved in most of the developed world, you will find that its success was very much dependent on much more patient money than institutional investment, for foreign institutional investment has in Africa or in Ghana in particular. Most of my experiences is that they expect things to return to an attractive enough investment that they can pull their funds out in about 5 years. I don't see it possible to do anything with foreign investment that doesn't have enough patience for a minimum of 10 years. Quite frankly, from my experience, my 35 years experience in agriculture here at this moment, I don't know if it will change in the future. So I suppose basically I would like to say that we do need investment, but we do need investment that is more patient. And if we can get that through direct dealings with, I forget the name you call them, the mutations, rather than institutional. Sorry? Rather than the institutional investments, I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Ken. And you two are also shining examples of successful businesses in Ghana that are making it. So please join me in thanking all of the panelists, both in Accra and in Berlin, for a really interesting discussion with lots of very practical recommendations for both sides, for the German side as well as for the Ghanaian side, which I hope we can summarize as one of the outcomes of this forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all our speakers, moderator, and those of you who spoke from the floor. A really great session. And I hope all that discussion about food has increased your appetite because it's now lunchtime. But it's a short lunch break. In order to synchronize with Berlin, we'll only have 45 minutes for lunch. We need to start again at 2 o'clock. Please don't run away because the next session is also going to be really very interesting. Lunch will be served on that side of the building.